move, leave. It's time to go. I mean, this is something that I find myself saying again and again to students that are pursuing a soul-led career. And so often they need to, what I call spiritually migrate, move to a new literal and physical location in order to further begin their soul-led career path. And the interesting thing here is that sometimes people will hear this and they'll think like, oh, like move like conceptually or like imagine my move. I'm like, no, you physically and literally need to move. And maybe that's because you're with your parents and you can't express yourself properly in that environment. Maybe you are in a city or a location that doesn't properly represent your values, or it's a place where you can never pursue your calling to its what I would call as an exalted form. And so you have to physically move to this new environment in order to even have a shot at beginning and getting towards what it is that you're meant for. Now, this doesn't happen with every single person that I've worked with, but it does happen so frequently that I wanted to bring this video to your attention, because if you're in the space like, I wonder what the problem is, and there's this deeper understanding where you're like, I think I need to move, but you don't really want to look at it because moving is hard and moving is tricky and moving can take some courage, then maybe this video is going to help you. And by the way, my name is Uili. I'm an occult philosopher, and I have been helping people to go through their own career awakening so they know exactly which path to choose. And in this video, I really wanted to go through why so often when people go through this career awakening, they suddenly need to move locations. So let's talk about this idea of spiritual migration. So essentially, there's these different environments in the world where you're going to be around different people, different cultures, different energies that allow you to properly express in a particular way. So there are different places, literal physical places in the world that when you're in those places, you have access to different parts of yourself. You have access to different expressions of yourself. Now, you can maybe think back to a time where you've traveled, where you acted a little bit differently, where you behaved a little bit differently, where you maybe said some things that, hey, back in my town, I wouldn't normally say this because I'm here. I mean, this is what we're talking about here. It opens you up to different parts of yourself that typically are lying dormant, that haven't been accessed for a while, and that are waiting for you to tap into them in order to utilize them and bring them forward. Now, conversely, there are environments on the opposite side as well, meaning that there are environments that hold you back from seeing these parts, hold you back from tapping into these pieces of yourself that want to come forward but can't. Or maybe you don't even know that there are parts of yourself that can come forward. One common experience that a lot of introverts can have is when they go overseas, maybe they go on one of these party fucking cruises or something like that, and suddenly they're a little bit more extroverted. So they had this extroverted piece of themselves within them. However, they needed to travel outside of the boundaries of the confines in which they found themselves in order to even get access to themselves. And if you want to go deeper into this idea, you can dive into the alchemists and look for the idea of coincidentia oppositorum, meaning that every opposite is joined as one, meaning that every extrovert has introversion within them and every introvert has extroversion within them, meaning that we have the totality of humanity within us, in our lineage, and by connecting into these different pieces of ourselves, we can express them in the world. Which brings me back to this idea of spiritual migration, meaning that for you to go to your next phase, for you to begin activating or beginning your soul-led career, it might not require introspection. It might not require deep thinking. It might require you to be in a completely different environment. It might mean that you have to say to your parents, hey, I'm actually going to move out in the next month and I'm going to move towns because I just want to be in a different place. Now, depending on your relationship with your parents, you're going to get a different response. But typically, on the norm, if you have normal parents and you sit them down and you explain it to them, then they tend to support you. However, if you don't have parents that are supportive, it actually becomes more urgent for you to move because you need to be in a space where you can properly just tune in to yourself. And I actually worked with a student a little while ago, and she couldn't even get her career path going. She couldn't even connect into her soul's work until she had left home because her parents were reliant on her, her family members were reliant on her, and she was living at home with her parents. And they were constantly watching her, constantly observing her. If she said something that was a little bit anti what everybody else believed, they'd be like, no, that's not what we believe here. And that constant having to and getting hit by other people's opinions, by other people's judgments, meant that she properly couldn't bring herself into her expression or really just reveal what was going on internally, which actually caused this shell going on the top. Now, another example of a student that had to go through a spiritual migration was one that was living in a country town. And so she was living in this country town. She was very, very isolated. And yet she was somebody that was very, very social. She needed to be around lots of different groups, lots of different people. And the energy was just infectious. And because when she was around other people, she was able to lift up, she was able to lift other people up. But being isolated, it just deflated her. And so being in this environment alone, it wasn't that she had to work on some personality things. It wasn't that she had to, read a fucking self-help book or anything like that. She just needed to move locations, and she did. And the moment she moved location, she said to me that she was just like super with it. And things were just clicking just from moving. And the sad thing is, so many people know they need to move. They know they need to leave. They know that the environment's stifling. They know that all these different things that are pushing on them from the environment is holding them backwards, restricting them from seeing who they are. And yet, because it's a little bit hard, because it's tough and they have to confront themselves and the place and the situation that they're in order to move, they don't move. Now, the case can absolutely be made. It's like, hey, I'm in a particular financial situation. It's going to take me some time. I'm like, cool, but where's the plan? Like, is this just an idea? Is this just a theory? Or do you have a plan? Do you have some steps? Have you made any real moves towards moving? Which brings me to one of the biggest reasons as to why you would even want to spiritually migrate in the first place. And one of the major reasons is that by being in a different environment, the boundaries are dissolved. I mean, this is a nice alchemical term. I mean, if you've heard a Terence McKenna talk, you've probably heard him talking about dissolving the boundaries when you take psychedelics. But this is a different kind of boundary dissolving. By being in a new location, you no longer have the walls and the restrictions of the physical environment, and you no longer have the walls and restrictions over your own personality dynamic. I mean, if you have lived in a particular town or a particular place for a long period of time, then you have a certain persona that you express through. It's like, hey, I'm fucking Jerry, and because I'm Jerry, I go to the shops at 5 p.m. every Friday to go and get a snack after work. And so this is my persona as Jerry. And so this persona loses itself when Jerry goes on holiday, or when Jerry says, oh shit, I have to face my own soul, so I'm going to go and move to Florence. And in moving to Florence, oh, I've got to go and learn a new language. Whoa, there's a word for this thing that I didn't even know was a thing. And so there are all these different structures that just begin to fade away. And this fading away causes a reorientation of the individual towards the environment. Which actually leads me to another reason as to why people should move, which is new opportunities. I mean, sometimes people can get a bit starry-eyed. They're like, oh man, if I just lived in this place, if I just lived in this place, that would be everything would be sorted out. And a lot of the times this moving shifts things so much that you're able to begin walking your soul-led career. But honestly, so many opportunities come from being in a new environment, because the current environment is almost in a way exhausted. In other words, it's like you've got one of those cloths and you've dipped it in water and you've squeezed all the water out. And by moving, the cloth can get into the water again. You can pull out a new cloth and it's rejuiced. And so there's all these new opportunities that can nurture you along your path. And these opportunities are only available to you if you move. I mean, you can't get those opportunities if you don't move. And they always cause this sense of growth, because these new opportunities that come along require you to access these different pieces of yourself, which means you're getting to experience yourself in a different way. So let's say, for example, you traveled over to Spain and you never heard about a siesta before, and you never knew about a nightlife that would last until the early hours of the morning. And so you're in Spain and then suddenly you are staying up all night and you're coming into contact with new people and you're having new experiences, and you're realizing that there are certain ways that you're acting back home that over here you're just able to express more, and you're able to tell people more about yourself because you don't think that they're going to judge you, even though on a pretty universal level, there are going to be some humans that judge you and some humans that don't judge you. But yet, because you're from this small town, you think that it's more judgmental than this town over here. And really, although the environment has changed, what's really changed is your self-understanding of who you are as an individual. And this grows you because guess what? When you go back to that small town, say, for example, someone's having a party at that small town and you go back and you have access to all these different parts of you. Other people are just going to be like, whoa, like, you're different now. Like, yeah. And another reason that you're different and another reason to move locations is actually because the location itself has the ability to transfer, in a way, what's going down in that space. This can be thought of as an energy transference that can activate more components of who you are. For example, if you were to go to Florence and you're going to go and look at all the amazing art, you coming in contact with all that amazing art is going to shift some things within you. Things that couldn't have been shifted unless you went and lived in that place for a period. And I'm a big believer that the environment can shape you as well as you can shape the environment. I mean, this is a very alchemical idea. This idea that nature is a book and that we're constantly in communication and contact with this book or with nature, and that we are always in relationship to it, meaning that if you were in an environment that is in alignment with the person that you're meant to become, the environment can give you access to the knowledge and bring it forth to you. And what that does is it can activate you. So when people are walking a soul-led Kriya, they can get and receive information, certain pieces of knowledge from the environment that give them those windows into what it is that they're meant to be doing, how it is that they're meant to be doing it, the kinds of people that they're meant to be serving, the type of work that they're meant to be doing. All this information comes forth. Which also leads me to this idea that there are variations of who you are and your personality based on where you are in the world, and that you can have access to these variations of your personality by moving around, finding out what these pieces of you are, what they look like, what these shades are, and it's going to give you more of yourself. I mean, there's this idea in astrology called relocation charts. The basic idea is meaning that you have your natal chart, your base chart that expresses essentially your life journey, your life trajectory, components of who you are. And there's also a chart that you can look at which shows you essentially your experience in a particular location, meaning that if you move to this location, you will experience a variation of yourself, a different coloring of yourself, and a different coloring of an experience that you might not have had if you had stayed at home. Now, once again, this brings an upside, this brings a downside. Not all experiences are fucking rosy. However, they are all going to be learning experiences that you can draw on, that can continue to fuel your path, which is why when I see that somebody is held back by their environment, I say, move, go. It's time to leave.